So I just got home saying one of my more anticipated films from this year, and that is The Smashing Machine. You know already, go hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode. We have daily film content, including movie reviews, movie news, and so much more. So go ahead and hit the subscribe button to never miss a video. Now, like I said, I just got back from seeing The Smashing Machine, which was one of my more anticipated films of this year. And I have to say, as much as I like this movie, I feel a little underwhelmed. It's so much. There's so much to this story, and this is coming from somebody who doesn't know the origins or anything really about these fighters and about the origins of UFC or anything of that nature. Like, my early on experience or knowledge of UFC was Chuck Liddell, the Iceman, and that was probably in like 2008, 9-ish, maybe 2010. I think it was 8, 9 when he was really big. And my only knowledge of that was that, you know, he was one of the biggest UFC fighters at that time. And he was like the one everybody at school talked about. And then I remember briefly, I grew up watching wrestling. So Brock Lesnar, I knew, had went to go do UFC for a while and then came back to WWE. So again, I don't have a huge background knowledge on UFC or Pride or any of these other fighting competitions or tournaments. So kind of going in blind with that and not having that prior knowledge, it is somewhat at a disadvantage, I feel like, because I wouldn't say this film is as uninformative as, say, Sid and Nancy, which I know is another film that a lot of people love and have this cult following, I would say. Sid and Nancy from the 80s with Gary Oldman. Now, again, I feel like Sid and Nancy, it told a very specific story, but unless you had a background knowledge of the Sex Pistols and you knew of the origins of Sid Vicious, and you knew everything there was to know about them prior to seeing that movie, you feel kind of lost. And this movie, I feel like it's very similar. Now, I've seen quite a few trailers for this. For going in, I kind of had an idea of what I was going into and kind of what I was expecting. I've been following this film pretty much all year throughout the festivals. I know at Cannes, like a 9-minute standing ovation. It was definitely one of those films that was already on my radar, and it just kind of been creeping up on my desire to see list because of how much praise it's been getting. Now, it did debut, I think, at a 73 on Rotten Tomatoes. So not a great opening critic score. So, again, a little hesitant on that because it kind of was like, okay, maybe this isn't going to be as phenomenal as the trailers made it seem, and maybe this isn't going to be that film. Like, it's going to be kind of falling short. Start off with performances. Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, gave a phenomenal performance in this film, and he definitely went outside of his wheelhouse because his wheelhouse is very much, you know, that one character ambiance kind of. He will play a different character in other movies, but it's usually the same in the same bubble, we'll say. Not to say the same character, but the same bubble. And he kind of sticks to that. There's even a joke online, you had like a meme where it had 4 different stills from 4 different movies, and it all the films starring The Rock, and you could not tell it was 4 different movies unless you've seen all 4 films and you knew exactly what scene was from which, because they really look like he's wearing the same outfit, like he's in like a really tight gray shirt or something. So again, you can't really tell because every film he does, he plays such a similar character. It's practically playing the same role. But in this one, he definitely branches out, and I think he does kind of get a chance to show his more dramatic side and show that he actually can act, and you have more than just him playing himself. Even though he's playing a fighter, which again, he has a wrestling background, having a wrestling background kind of makes him perfect for this role, but I feel like it's not him playing himself. Emily Blunt gave a phenomenal performance. I am a huge Emily Blunt fan, so again, was looking forward to seeing her in this film. And I think that might be why I'm partially biased on this film too as well. So I feel like she did not get enough screen time. And that's not because I feel like she needed more time to really perform in this film, because she gave a killer performance. But from a more storytelling perspective, I feel like we're lacking something, and it just feels Again, this movie was like 2 hours and 7 minutes, so it wasn't a lean film, but it felt very lean watching it. At no point in time do you get bored or feel like there's any moment that really drags on. Honestly, they could have tacked on another 53 minutes and made a 3-hour epic, and I would have been along for the ride because I feel like we're missing so much. Because the film takes place from the years of 1997 to 2000, so it gives you a 3-year span of, inside the life of this, legendary fighter. But in those 3 years, we do see a good amount of actual fight sequences, which is very cool, and really kind of intriguing, and what I would expect from a movie about, a legendary fighter. However, I feel like there's so much more background story that we just kind of scratched the surface of the story, and we don't really kind of understand why any of this happens. Yes, there are a couple of milestone moments that we get to follow along the story that, of course, are indicators that could be, moving along the storyline, but there's so much more beneath that. Like, okay, Emily Blunt's character plays the love interest, which was his girlfriend for many, many years until they eventually got married, which is not part of the movie. But again, that's just some stuff you look into more after the film, kind of just trying to piece together all these different kind of tidbits of information. Now, again, she doesn't get a lot of screen time, and you can tell from the get-go that there's tension between them, but you don't know really why. And as the film goes on, you see more of their love-hate relationship, and they have a very complex relationship, and the film shows there's definitely this unsettling kind of toxicity to the relationship, but we never actually see why. She's in the film so scarcely, but her character is supposedly playing such a huge part of his life, but we really don't see that. It kind of hinders the overall storyline. Because again, I know that's part of what I'm kind of touch on too, is that that hinders the storyline because we don't really see what happens, and we don't get an insight on their relationship, which I think plays a huge part in the events of his life, because there are scenes in which, without spoiling anything, we get flashback scenes, which is just a phenomenal directorial choice in kind of trying to piece together why things happen. We have these moments where you just kind of flashback and montage scenes to kind of give a little more cinematic insight. But with this film being based on a true story and it telling the real events, it does have moments that are uncinematic. And it just because, in a storytelling perspective, you kind of know what to expect. You kind of have this high build up where you're expecting a high, but you really don't get there. It just kind of more plateaus and just kind of stays more on a flat line. And it's not because, it's a bad film. It's because that's just the reality of the events. They don't change any events to make it more cinematic, which is staying true to the actual origins and the actual events that took place. But with that being said, I feel like, again, there's so much more with that relationship that, his love interest and his personal life that they don't really touch upon, which really could have beefed up and given us more insight and more closure and more understanding of, his character and him as a person, which I think is my biggest gripe. Because the whole drive home, my thoughts were, how could this film have been better? Because I feel like it was good. I don't want to call it great because I don't feel like it really hit there. But at no point was I boring. Was it boring? At no point was I bored in this film. At no point did I feel like, okay, when's this movie going to end? It's starting to drag. At no point did I feel that. I was invested the entire film from start to finish. I was invested. But I feel like it just did. I left me wanting more, which is something a good film always does. But I feel like it left questions unanswered. Generally, when you have films that are based on a true story, towards the end of the film, you will have the writing come across the screen, kind of just giving us information and facts about their lives and what happened years down the road, and kind of just give you an insight of closure. But I feel like that's kind of a cop-out because you're giving me an insight of what happened or closure on what happened, but you're not giving me enough of the events leading up to that. And I feel like they left out such a huge part of his personal life that I don't know the reason behind that. I just feel like it is missing something. So with that being said, I'm still going to give this film a full price because I had a great time watching this film. This is definitely something that I feel like you're not going to feel like you waste your money seeing it at a full price. But as far as Oscars go, like I've been like in the back of my mind thinking, okay, this film is definitely going to win, definitely going to get at the very least a nomination for Dwayne Johnson, potentially in a best actor role, but probably for producer because he's one of the producers on the film, along with Benny Safdie. I think I'm pronouncing his name right. Who wrote and directed the film? Same writer-director behind Uncut Gems with Adam Sandler. So yeah, I was expecting this film to really kind of be a big contender in Oscar season, but now I'm not so certain, just because there are some aspects of this film that just doesn't take me to that level. I don't see this film sweeping the Oscars this year. As far as a technical standpoint, a few things I do want to kind of touch on real quick. I feel like the editing was phenomenal in this film. So from a technical standpoint, I think that was definitely solid, along with his choice of various different cameras he used to film this movie. Now, I read a little bit about it prior to seeing it. I know he reportedly used like a 16 millimeter camera. Some of the footage was shot on 16 millimeter film, like Clerks, and he used various different cameras to film different scenes. And again, I thought it was a very wise choice because your opening is shown like a 16 millimeter grade of footage. I call it cheap because that just sounds demeaning to what the film has. It has this very vintage, I guess you would say is a better word, look to it, and it has that look like you're almost watching a home video to give it some authenticity, which I really loved. And not the whole film is not shot that way, and there are parts of the film that kind of have this different look to them, and they're usually in small increments that really kind of help tie up the story nicely and kind of give you kind of draws you in more because it gives you more insight onto what you're watching, which I thought was really nice. But overall, like I said, I give this film a full price. It doesn't really scream Oscar bait I originally thought it was going to, based upon word of mouth from festivals and early reviews. I thought this one was going to be a little more higher up on the Oscar bait wheel. Again, still pretty early for that to be said, because we still have another 2.5 months of films coming out, or really almost 3. That being said, I'm gonna stick with this one to a full price. I probably will watch this again, probably sooner rather than later. I didn't really enjoy it. I just feel like there is some things missing. Part of it being the insight of his more personal life and how Emily Blunt's character really affected him. Not only as a fighter, but just in his personal life overall, because it felt like they had a very toxic-ish relationship, and we don't really explore that, so it kind of feels like something's wrong, but you just don't know what, and you don't really get much insight. I feel like I just add one more thing before we wrap up. We're going to wrap up this. I feel like there is another film, or at least another good 53 minutes of film laying somewhere on the cutting room floor that had to get cut from this film, because it just feels like parts are missing. But in that same breath, I will say that even though it feels like parts are missing, they did a fantastic job pulling a Frankenstein and just tying it all together to make this cohesive film that really works. So could there be more on the cutting room floor? Possibly not, because how well pieced together this film is. There could be a possibility that there isn't more, but just given how important a few scenes are that play these huge roles in the overall story, I feel like we are missing more backstory, and I wish we would have got more of that. But I don't know. We'll see. Maybe they might release a director's cut. With that being said, we're going to wrap it up with this. Have you saw The Smashing Machine? Are you going to? What are your thoughts? Comment below. Let me know.